Good evening. My name is Alan Swain, and happy to have you all here. I'm actually also running for Congressional District 2 for Wake County in North Carolina. We're privileged to have with us a couple of distinguished guests with us tonight. The same guests we had a few weeks ago. This is a continuation with our conversation on public safety and how important it is to us as leaders and what we want to do not only for Wake County, for this state, the city of Raleigh, and also for our nation. So I'd like to welcome our two guest speakers tonight, our former Wake County Sheriff Donnie Harrison and our candidate for Wake County Commissioner, Mr. Steve Hale, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. Just so you know, Sheriff Harrison grew up in Bear Grass, North Carolina. He currently lives in Garner and has two daughters, one granddaughter and one grandson. He's a four-term sheriff of Wake County from 2002 to 2018. As sheriff, Donnie was dedicated and accessible to the public 24/7. He served on the, prior to that, he had served on the North Carolina Highway Patrol in Wake County for 26 years. So here's a gentleman that's served our local community for 40 plus years, and we thank him for his service. Donnie's also been an active community member who served as a volunteer firefighter, a youth softball coach, and was highly respected high school and college basketball official. He received the Order of the Longleaf Pine recipient, not once, not twice, but three times. Three governors of the state of North Carolina thought enough of Donnie Harrison to award him with the prestigious Longleaf Pine award or order. So we're fortunate to have Donnie with us. Mr. Steve Hale is a lifelong resident of Wake County. He attended all Wake County public schools, including Wake Tech and North Carolina State. He's a former Army veteran, served in counterintelligence in Europe during the Cold War. Steve is a member of Wake County's, was a member of Wake County Sheriff Office for 26 years. He retired as a detective lieutenant of homicide unit. He is a North Carolina licensed private investigator and has been appointed to work over 200 murder defense cases by the North Carolina Indigent Defense Services. Again, Steve is serving and working to be as one of our top leading candidates for Wake County Commission. Without further ado, I want to hand the mic over to Donnie to let him do a little intro and talk about what's on his mind, and we'll pass it off to Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm glad to be here, and I want to reach out to people and let them know that law enforcement is still here. I was very disappointed in law enforcement several weeks ago when everything happened downtown Raleigh and all the property that was torn up. That was people's property that people had worked hard for. And stand by and watch all that happen just doesn't sit well with me. And it's not the police officer's fault. It's higher up's fault that's telling them to stand down. And I got word that that's where it was coming from. And I know those guys, and I know they were ready to do what they had to do to protect, because we took an oath to serve and protect lives and property. So it's good for me to be able to talk to people and say, hey, we're still here. And I wrote a letter to the News Observer, to the editorial, and of course, they didn't print it, and I didn't think they would, but it was to show that we've got to reach out and start doing something about this. I understand people getting upset, and they had a right to over the Floyd thing. It was something that we and police officers and law enforcement, we just cringe when we see something like that. Yes, we have some bad officers, but with the number of officers we have throughout the United States, 800,000 plus, we have very few. And we have a thing set up that if we do have a bad officer, we try to get them out. And we ask the citizens to talk to us about that. I know when I was in office, I was out in the county trying to make sure my deputies were doing the things that they were supposed to do. And I had a free reign with the public. They were willing to come to see me anytime. I had an open door policy. This defunding police officers just doesn't go well with me. If anything, they need to be giving us more money. And the reason for that, the Wake County Sheriff's Office is one of the lowest paid agencies in Wake County. And when I was there, we were trying to get the salary up for the guys and try not to hire too many, because we wanted them to get their salary up like everybody else. But, you know, we take our training very, very seriously. The LET training, we go into that, and we even do a couple of hundred more hours in our own training to make sure that our guys understand what's going on. And if anything, the money that we get should be, one, to hire better qualified people, to set people say, hey, I can go to work in the sheriff's office and make this kind of money. Two is to train more. We had all kind of training. We did everything that the state asked us to. Like I say, we did even more than the state asked us to. Diversity training right on down the line. I think those in law enforcement need to reach out to the public. The public is who we're there to serve. This is something that a lot of people don't do. It is sort of like community policing. Sheriff's office has a hard time doing that because of the area that we cover. We cover all the unincorporated areas. But it's one thing I would tell all of my deputies: be in the area. When you're there working, if you see people, stop and talk to them. Let them know that you work this area. Stop by convenience stores, stop by businesses, leave your card, say, this is the area that I work. Call me anytime if you need something. And I stressed that from day one, and I'll continue to stress that. So I just don't get it when they're talking about, hey, let's defund and do this and do that. I don't understand really about it. We work very closely with mental health. That was one thing. We were one of the first agencies to go into CIT training. That was people that was trained to go out in the field and talk to people. We worked very hard, and we were going to even train our jail personnel with that. And I don't know what happened since I've left. But that's something we took seriously. We had people in the jail that were, I'll be honest with you, we were the biggest mental health hospital in Wake County and in the state probably, because we had quite a few people in jail, up to 1,300 at times. A lot of those people were having mental health problems. And when we had a liaison that we hired to come in and work with the county and between us. And if a person was being released, that person would call the county and let them know. We tried to make sure they had the medicine. They tried to make sure we had a doctor or somewhere they could go. So that to me is, we need money to do that. Yes, we need people to help us too. I have no problem with mental health people helping us and others. De-escalated training is something that we all need. And the thing about it is, we have leaders in this county. We have Black leaders, we have Hispanic leaders, we have all kind of leaders. My job was to talk to those leaders, and I did as much as I could. Anytime somebody called me, I was there. I even went some places that I probably they didn't want me there, but I served everybody, from the janitor to the president. And that's the way I look at it. And so I'm here tonight for any questions that they may have. There again, I'm embarrassed of what happened. I know the police officers, the routine guys, and the law enforcement guys that's working, they're upset because of things that's happened and they've been held back. I don't understand it. I hope the silent majority is hearing me tonight, and I hope the silent majority speaks up and say, hey, instead of cutting their salary, let's give them some more money. Let's train them better so we can have better police officers. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Donnie. The floor is yours, Steve.
Thank you, Alan. So this past couple of weeks in preparing for this webinar, I've been interviewing some police officers to get a sense of how they feel, what they're seeing. And they agree with some of the things that we've already said, that our civilian leaders are swapping public safety for political correctness. I mean, this ongoing assault on law enforcement, the demonizing of police officers, the media misinforming the public, the shooting in Detroit on Friday. It's clear that the suspect was firing on the officer. It was firing at the officer's head. You can see burning powder coming from the weapon, and yet the media still characterizes it as allegedly shooting at the police officer, when anyone with 20/20 vision can see that that's what happened. The police officers feel like they can't speak out about what they're being subject to during these riots and these protests. They're being hit with bricks and bottles. They've been standing on this front line for weeks, and they feel like they're helpless to do their job because they've been ordered not to. During this time that protesters were throwing bottles of urine and bricks at setting police cars on fire, and then the police officers were getting trouble for using tear gas and firing non-lethal bullets to disperse the crowds. We're about to lose law enforcement in this country. If we don't do something to stop this notion of defunding police agencies, and if not, we're heading toward privatization of law enforcement. You take these officers that's got 8 or 12 years experience, that's your detectives. Those are your sergeants. Those are the ones that your leaders, your field training officers. Well, they're being recruited by industry, and they're being offered much more money than what the police are paying them. And if that starts to happen, it's going to be a floodgate. When you lose that core, as the Army would call those NCOs, that middle management between the soldiers on the front line and the command staff, that's the key to a successful law enforcement agency. And they're looking at their options. And as long as they're on duty and they're standing on the line, they have my support. And if they feel like they can't do this job anymore because their civilian leadership is not backing them up, I'm going to stand with them if they make that decision to leave. I'll continue to stand with them. We just run the scenario. If we defund the police department or privatize law enforcement, the communities that are going to be the most impacted by that are the low-income communities. These gated communities will hire their own police. They'll hire their own security. It's going to be the lower-income people that will be impacted the most by defunding the police. And then you've got people that are arming themselves. Once people start taking the law in their own hands and start trying to enforce or intervene in altercations themselves, we're going to have people that aren't trained and practice with weapons trying to act as police officers. We're going down a path that just is not going to end well. And if we don't stand up now and speak out for these police officers who have no voice, this country and this community is in a lot of trouble. Thank you, Alan.
Piggybacking on some of the things you talked about there, Steve, with regard to, and Donnie too, with regard to defunding, you look at what's happening everywhere. You look at the city of Minneapolis taking $20 million. Their entire city council wants to completely do away with their police force and have peace officers for public safety, whatever that means. They can't even tell you, what they want to do, but they want to defund by $20 million. City of Seattle, where they had the CHOP or Chaz zone, they brought up that the city council, 7 out of 9 city council members voted just this week to defund the police by 50%. And even the mayor who allowed the CHOP zone to occur is now saying, you guys are going too far. Rather than shifting the funds around, you get the city of New York defunded by $1 billion. Those people still don't want to leave their city hall square. They still don't think it's enough. They wanted $1 billion. They give them $1 billion. They're not assessing 1,200 new police officers in the New York City Police Department the month of July to try and accommodate that. They're taking $354 million out of the city's budget for overtime. So that means less police on the streets, period. And then plus, there is a massive wave of resignations and retirements going on within the New York City Police. So if you've gone from having one of the finest police forces in the entire world, if not just our nation, and they're decimating them. They did away with a 600-man 600-man anti-crime group and just completely shut them down. So you wonder why the crime is spiking at the 300 to 150 level, worth 50% in not crimes, but in shootings, and the violence is just exponential this year compared to last year. And then you take a look at the LA PD, what they want to do with them. The belief is they're going to take $150 million out of their police fund in the city of LA. And now the teachers union of LA has come out there. It's actually extortion. They've said, not only do we want you to defund the police, the $150 million, we want you to do away with the charter school system, which is their competition, before they'll even start schools in the county of LA. So, it's happening everywhere. That $150 million in the city of LA equates to 800 police officers coming off the books. They're going to have them resign or have them increase their resignations. So the problem is happening everywhere. What we don't want, even though we're trying to help the whole nation, and that's why we're here as leaders trying to help make a difference and get the word out, is Raleigh next? Is North Carolina next? And that's got to be the concern of every person on this call that's listening. And that's why this Back the Blue, Feed the Blue series of things we're trying to do is getting exposure. The people need to show their support for the men in blue. It's just critical. All first responders need to know that the people want peace. They want to know that when they dial 911, someone's not going to come 5 days later and tell them what was the issue. Was it a robbery? Was it a rape? Or was it a murder? I mean, that's what's going to come down to. When you see that commercial by President Trump or a campaign ad, the truth is coming if we don't stop and stand up. We can't be that silent majority anymore. We have to voice our opinion and make a difference. And that's why these types of town halls are critical to us. I'd like to get into a couple of questions that are coming in, and they're good. I'll leave it out to both of you. What is the best way for folks to show support for the law enforcement officers at this time, in your opinion? What do you think we need to be doing besides vocalizing it?
I'll let Steve go first on that one, and then I'll chime in.
Look for them in your community and thank them. Smile and wave. They're fearful. They don't know who their enemy is. These protesters aren't wearing uniforms. We can't distinguish them until they hurl that rock. They're concerned with their own safety. They're concerned with their family's safety. This is law enforcement's a dangerous business. I mean, it's the only, besides the military, it's the only profession where you're trained to run towards danger. You're trained to put your life between the community and the evildoers. And we've got to show gratitude. We've got to show them that we got their back. And we're going to elect civilian leaders that are going to have their back. And I personally am going to work to elect leaders that are going to support law enforcement.
Let me just say too, I was talking to one of the chiefs last week, and he told me in the United States there's over 800,000 police officers. And he told me he had just read something or saw it on TV One where 70,000 in the last 30 days had left for different reasons, retirement, just quitting and saying the heck with it, whatever it may be. But what people forget when it comes to police officers, the fire department, the rescue people, they count on us to go into neighborhoods and to be there before they come in. If there's a fire going on, and gunfires out there, I don't blame them. I wouldn't go either. Some of them is even trying to get the departments armed, and I certainly understand that. Same thing with rescue. If you have a shooting or something, they don't know what they're getting into. That's why law enforcement tries to be the first responder to get there so that they can come in and do their job and do their job peacefully. So, and what can you do? You can look at who you're voting for a lot. And I'm not trying to get into politics, because sheriff's office shouldn't be political, because we serve everybody in Wake County and everybody in any other county. And that's what I try to do. But, somebody's going to label you as a politician before it's over with anyway. But they need to keep up with what's going on. There's so many people that don't vote. They're complacent. And I can assure you, if they do away with police officers, you're going to see the biggest difference you've ever seen. Look at the little place in Seattle that no longer they were there. They were having shootings. They were having robberies right on down the line. But as Steve said, support us. Every time I made a speech, or I say every time, probably 99% of the time, I'd always end my speech with, if you see a military officer, either if he's retired or active, say thank you. If you see a police officer, say thank you. And it's the same thing with any first responder, but being I'm in law enforcement, I want to encourage them. I encourage my men to go into neighborhoods, as I said earlier. We've got to build a better relationship. There's no question about that. But the men are afraid to say anything. They're afraid to do anything. They're afraid that anything they do is going to be right or wrong. And I have seen the biggest difference in the last 6-8 months I've seen in law enforcement in a long time. I talk to a lot of officers, and they say, Donnie, we don't know what to do. If we make a stop, if we do this, we do that, we're blamed for this and blamed for that. So what they're doing, they're just trying to do what they can do to get by. And I really don't blame them. So yes, you can help us by telling them thank you, help us by who you vote for. And because it's a lot of these politicians right now, and unfortunately it's election year, a lot of this stuff is coming because of election year. And I hate to say that, but it's true. And we know it, and a lot of other people know it. But we need your support, the silent majority. We need everybody's support, because if, like I say, it's going to be a mess if they do away with it. And I hope the heck I don't see that.
All great comments. I think a couple of things I would add to that. and it goes back to what Steve said, in the military, you kind of plan for battle and then you go into battle. Every day that police officer, law enforcement officer puts on his badge and puts on his uniform, kisses his family goodbye, he doesn't know if he's coming home. He hopes he's coming home that night. He doesn't know how long his shift could be potentially. They do battle. They go out and have all kinds of situations that are spur of the moment that come up. It's completely different. While we consider ourselves to be brothers between the men in blue and the men in uniform, military, the haphazards and the unknown that a police officer faces at a moment's notice. Let's talk about the other night in McAllen, Texas. Domestic disturbance, 2 police officers in McAllen, Texas go to try and quell. They were walking up to the house and were both shot dead. That's 2 families that are missing. Their fathers, their husbands, and how many of these, when you try and defund the police, how many social workers are going to want to sign up to be in McAllen, Texas, or any police force, knowing that that's what's ahead of them when they sign up to be a part of a force like that? We got a problem, and we've got to try and understand the predicament that our police officers go through day and night. Last night in Washington, just outside Seattle, started with a B, I apologize, Brethel or something like that, Bothell. 2 police officers were gunned down just at they pulled a car over just to check some data on the person, and one of them perished last night. He died en route to the hospital, and the other one's in fair condition. But again, a normal police stop on the side of the road, and we've lost another man in blue. So they go through these on a daily basis, and yet they're still out there trying to defend and protect us, so that 2 a.m. tonight, if something else happens, there's going to be another police officer there when we need him. So please reach out. Steve and I have talked about this several times, and Donnie, 2 to 3 months ago, we were applauding, we were giving free meals, we were doing everything we can. We were applauding all our law enforcement first responders. We couldn't do enough to thank them for all the things they were doing. A couple of bad apples in Minneapolis have now caused all this heartache and headache, and to see that now they're vilified and we want to defund them, we're going the wrong way. Like Sheriff Harrison said, we need to be enhancing their training, not defund, but new fund initiatives that are going to make them better police officers, better law enforcement officers for us. So that's the kind of stuff we need to be doing. But that's, thank you for y'all's inputs. We've got a question here. This ought to be interesting. Cynthia P. asked, what do you do if the protesters surround your car? What are some actions you'd recommend to a mother, a father, or anyone that's got children in their car? What would you do?
Well, I'll go ahead and take that. That's something that I tell my family, keep your doors locked all the time. That to me is probably kidnapping, a felony. And I know a lot of people said that some of the officers stood by and watched it happen. That really bothers me. It shouldn't happen. I mean, that person has got to be very careful and not hurt anybody, but that is their car. They can protect themselves, even as far as deadly force, if they are afraid enough to say that somebody's trying to take their life. And it's a questionable thing when you get into that. But they should never be allowed to do that. If law enforcement's standing by or close by, they should come to their aid just like anything else. We took an oath, and I keep saying that because I believe it from the bottom of my heart. I've been in this business for over 50 years. And I don't know of a police officer, and there may be some, law enforcement officer, maybe I should say, that wouldn't give their life to save another. And that's where we come into play. But that person should ease along as they're in a car. That's a 3,000 pound vehicle, and they should ease along. If they're crazy enough to stand in front of you, I'm sorry. But if you're afraid, you keep easing along, they'll get out of your way sooner or later. And if they start busting your windows out, and you got to do what you got to do to protect yourself, and the law will protect you on that also.
I support that. I support that notion 100%. And that's the advice that most agencies are giving: lock your doors and try to move out of the area. If there are no law enforcement officers nearby, you have a right to protect yourself. And when you're with family, you have a responsibility to them as well.
All good advice. I think the key to that, not only with the locked doors, is keep the vehicle moving. Don't let them get you where they can surround the vehicle, because you're right, they will then start knocking out some of the windows. They're trying to frighten, they're trying to obstruct, they're trying to send a message. And sometimes you have to do what it takes to protect you if you have a child in the back seat or something like that. They're trying to create fear, and your job should be to take care of the situation in any way you can. So those are all good comments, so thank you. I got a question from Clark P here. Do you think more body cams are needed to protect against false allegations?
I'll take that one, absolutely.
Yes.
What I told my officers when I was there, we could never really afford to get them. There's so many complications. We were in the process of trying to get them. We thought we would get them through a grant. That fell through. But as I told my officers, and many times, if you're doing the right thing, you don't have to worry about what's being filmed. But there is a lot of headaches with body cameras, because you go into a lot of places and you got to have a good policy procedure for that. And when I say that, I can tell you it's like going to a domestic. A lot of times we go into a domestic and the female is half clothed or whatever it may be, where they've been fighting and so forth and so on. We don't want that to come out in the public. And you know, the media, they want to grab everything they can. Different things we have to really watch out for. So you've got to really plan for it and have a good policy and procedure. But yes, I'm all for body cameras, and I think we should have them from day one, and they should be recorded. That's my take on it.
And I have to agree, Colonel Swain. That's I've gotten body camera videos in my investigations, criminal defense investigations, when officers go to a crime scene, they're interviewing witnesses. You get a very good sense of what was going on, who was being responsible, who was acting appropriately, and occasionally you'll see where someone was not acting appropriately. And I want to add something to what Sheriff Harrison was saying about Mr. Floyd. Sheriff Harrison assigned me to a number of internal affairs investigations, and I can assure you, when that report was turned in, that individual was dealt with swiftly. And what happened in Minneapolis would not have happened here, because that officer with 17 or 18 prior complaints would no longer be employed with the Wake County Sheriff's Department, and either with Sheriff Harrison, Sheriff Gerald Baker, John H. Baker Jr., or Robert Pleasance, who I've worked with all of them. Someone with that many complaints would not be serving the citizens of Wake County, I can assure you.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to go into some of these other questions that came in earlier via email. What measures do you propose to deal with the current protests that have turned to looting and violence in North Carolina, particularly in Raleigh or Fayetteville? We all know that, you know, the American people have the right to redress their grievances, freedom to assemble. But when they cross that line to looting and violence, what measures would you propose to deal with those kind of protests when they get out of hand?
Okay, I'll take it. Steve, you're a little bit slow, but I'll take it. You know, you plan ahead. That's why I was so disappointed in what was happening. I'm not blaming anybody, but when you're in a leadership position, you got to protect and serve. And what you do is plan for the worst and hope for the best. Like I say, we took an oath and to serve the people and protect the people and their property. To me, what I would do if I was in a leadership position like I was, I would try to talk to all the leaders that wanted to protest. I'd have sit down with them and talk with them, or stand up and talk with them, whatever they want to do, and just say, hey, we're here for you. We're going to protect you when you protest, as long as you're peaceful. But the moment that you start throwing bricks or you break a law, then we're going to have to take action. And what you do, you have the personnel to do this. You don't come back and say, well, I didn't have enough personnel to do it. And we work together. Some of these agencies are small, and they cannot protect themselves from anything. So the larger agencies and the agencies in your county, even out of county, you have a working relationship with them, and usually you have a contract with them that a working relationship that hey, I need help. We got a riot coming up, or we got a peaceful protest coming up, or whatever it's going to be. And you plan for that. And when you don't have to put all your people out there. Some people say, well, you're showing a show of force, you're doing this, you're doing that. Yes, so what? But what you do, you put the proper personnel in position, but you have people stationed in other places. And then if something happens, first time they throw a brick or first time they do something that's breaking the law, you call in the troops. It's the same thing in the military, and we're here to protect them. I've heard people say, breaking windows doesn't give you any right to push us back or hurt or get a police officer hurt or get an individual hurt. Wait a minute. Stop and think about it. If that was your business, or if that was your house and somebody's out there with fire bombs or whatever it may be, and throwing bricks and whatever it may be, would you want me to stand by and just look at them and say, okay, that's just the insurance company will pay for this. Let them do it. Don't come and help out. Let them do it. No way. I don't feel that way. And I may be the one that's wrong. And if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. But we took that oath, and that's what I like to see. I think you just got to plan. You got to work with the leaders of other groups. Yes, they have the right to protest, and it's peacefully. And I think when you communicate, and that is the key. The key is communication. Is talking to those leaders, and they know we're there to protect them from anybody else, so they can peacefully protest. And you talk to them, and you have an agreement, and you tell them, and tell your people that they can do this, and we're gonna keep people away from you. You explain what you want to do. You do what you want to do. We're all for it. You have that right. But once you start breaking the law, whether it's busting windows out of whatever it be, it was sad to ride down Fayetteville Street and see what happened in Raleigh. And I know those police officers, they wanted to do something about it, but they couldn't. It's not, I don't know if any police officer leaves home wanting to hurt somebody or wanting to shoot somebody. And it's just, that's not us. We just took an oath to protect and serve, and whoever it may be. It doesn't make any difference who it may be. And you just plan and you have it set up so you can get some help to help you if you don't have enough personnel. That's my take on it.
And I agree wholeheartedly. A number of the people that were infiltrating the peaceful protesters were only there to cause chaos and to create panic, set fires and break windows. The majority of the people participating in that protest were peaceful, and they were responsibly exercising their First Amendment right to bring a grievance to their government. But they were that movement was abdicated, was absconded by those people that were throwing bricks and setting fires. As the sheriff said, every department has mutual aid agreements with other departments, and so when you have a small department like Apex or Cary, can call the sheriff's office or Raleigh Police, and they'll have the same jurisdiction, same arrest powers, and same authority in that mutual aid venue that called for help. The first time a window was broken, it was no longer a peaceful protest. It is now a crime scene. It is now a crime scene. And if the police don't intervene, more personal injuries, deaths are likely to occur. You just cannot let people treat our communities like their battle scene, like their battleground. Minneapolis looks like Syria.
Yeah. Good comments there. I guess I would go back to military training, and Steve can confirm this too. Anytime you go into combat or into battle, you always have a reserve. You always have something there that the other opponent is not expecting, whether that would have been one or two buses of additional law enforcement officers off site somewhere or down in a basement somewhere, something of that nature, that when you need a show of force to show that you mean business, you can quell some of the instigators in a short period of time. When they attacked the Confederate monument and took down those statues a few weeks ago, they had those mutual agreements, or they had RPD, Capitol Police, and the Highway Patrol there. And when the first crowd came, there were enough law enforcement officers there to quell anything going on, and they left. What they did was they went back and got protester reinforcements. And when they came back, several of the law enforcement agencies had moved away, and all that was left were the Capitol Police officers. And when that happened, they were just told, get away. There's not enough of us here to stop. The crowd had almost doubled in size. So what they quelled at 7:30, by 9 o'clock, there was not enough law enforcement to stop the incidents that occurred there. And because of that, with the stroke of the pen over the weekend, the governor then decided to pull the other monument and take the statue off the top of the obelisk. So that's where the mutual agreements helped in the initial phase, but then something happened within the order chain of command to dissuade keeping them present for that. So that was a problem. It needs to be fixed. Let's hope there's lessons learned from it. But again, we have done something to a monument that meant something to some people. And there's a grievance process. There is a process to remove statues if the people choose to do that. It should not be the stroke of a pen of one individual citing safety reasons. I don't know if you have seen the Confederate monument, but it would take one heck of a climber to get to the top to even attempt to take down that statue that came off the top of that with help of a crane.
Let me chime in just a second on that. That night, you're right in what you said, but there was a gentleman named Cordell Davis. I do not know the gentleman. I'd shake his hand if I could see him or meet him somewhere or another. They were peacefully protesting. And what happens usually in these protests, you got some people that are thugs that come in, and that all they want to do is cause problems. And people like Mr. Davis's group, they were doing what they were supposed to do and what they wanted to do. They were peacefully protesting. Mr. Davis even went as far as when the police left the statues for the protesters or the rioters, let me put it that way, to tear down. Mr. Davis even tried to tell them that he had been working with the legislature, that there was a process already started where they could get some money to put up some other statues, plus the statues that they wanted to come down were in the process of coming down the right way. And they said, this is the way we're going to do it. And they threw one of his people to the ground, and I don't blame them. I mean, looks around, there's no law enforcement. Here he is him and his group's trying to help do the right thing. And then you got the thugs out there that wants to come in and do the damage. But I would to me, he needs a pat on the back and a shake of the hand for standing up to it. And like I say, I don't know him, but if I ever run into him, I would certainly shake his hand for it. And I appreciate it. But there's the kind of people that we need to protect, that want to do it peacefully. And the other thugs we need to put in jail.
I agree. In fact, when you do go down Fayetteville Street, you don't know how long it's going to take for them to recover. If you go back to the riots in Baltimore a few years ago, many of those stores will never open again. And the blight and the sad part about it is a lot of those rioters shopped in those stores that they ransacked during their looting and rioting, and that's the problem. Now they're going, well, there's nothing here for us to shop, so that's why it's a blighted area. We don't want that to happen on Fayetteville Street, but when you see all the boarding that occurred after that rioting that weekend, we still have problems. We still have them shutting down Capitol Boulevard, interstates, and things of that nature. How we get some resolution, and probably need to go back to what you were talking about, Donnie. We need to get back, sit down face to face and communicate with these people if they're the ones that want to communicate. The problem is a lot of the people that are doing the roadblocks and things of that nature, they don't want to talk. They just want to obstruct. But we still need to take and make an attempt to try and solve the problems peacefully. So I concur with you there. Some people are worried about, and this next question, what can police at any level, city, county, or state, do when a stand down order is issued? I know you follow the chain of command. That's a tough question, but I'm going to ask you as a former sheriff, and then we'll ask this former lieutenant here to tell us how he would handle some of those situations. But that's a tough call when you're the man in charge or you're being told to stand down.
You're right. And the good thing about being a sheriff, you're elected by the people, and nobody really tells you except when they vote to get in or out. you got jurisdiction throughout your county, and you work closely, like Steve said, mutual aid agreements. You work closely with all the chiefs and anybody in Wake County. And if you think the right thing is to protect those lives and property, and I do, then you go and do the best you can, unless you don't have the manpower to do it. But there it goes back to planning and getting the right personnel there. You can overstep the chief in any town if you want to. We don't like to do that because we have a good relationship with the chiefs in Wake County. But you know, you have to, when you got something going on throughout the United States like this, and you got information through whatever means that is coming to Raleigh or coming to wherever, Wendell, Zebulon, Garner, wherever it may be, then you work together. And I can tell you, when I was sheriff, I had some conversations with some of the chiefs about this. And I told them how I felt, that we should not let them tear up people's property. And I'll stay with that. You know, I'm not a sheriff now, but if I was ever to get back into law enforcement, I still have that same philosophy. And I think most officers do have that philosophy, and they feel like they should do it. And like you said, Alan, some of these people will never recover. And so my point is, yes, the chiefs, unfortunately, the town manager, the city council, they sort of tell the chiefs what to do. And, you know, I don't know what happened up there. I know I've talked to enough officers with the Highway Patrol, with the Raleigh Police Department, with the Capitol Police, saying, hey, we want to do something to keep this from happening. This is our town. We want to protect these people. And somebody somewhere along the line didn't agree with that. And I don't know who it was. And if I did, I'd certainly give them a call and tell them my opinion. And because, like I say, if it was their property, their business, their house, whatever it may be, or their car that's being stopped, their wife in their car, or their daughter, their son, or whatever it may be, grandson, they would be raising Cain. They would be calling us, why do you do something? So we need to do some soul searching when you're in a place of you're elected, or you're whatever it may be, you're there to make decisions. You need to do some soul searching and say, hey, what if this was happening to me? I used to have a saying with the sheriff's office. I tell my officers, I know times sometimes get tough when you stop a car and they don't want to cooperate. And I said, you'll lose it once in a while. I said, when you start losing it, you put your hand in front of your face and say, would I want somebody talking to me like that? Would I want somebody talking to my wife, my daughter, my mother? And I said, that's when you try to get yourself on and you try to de-escalate it. Same thing here. Would you want somebody tearing your property up knowing that that's your livelihood? Absolutely not. So as a sheriff, you've got a little bit more leeway than you have with the city police. And I feel sorry for them, because I know sometimes they want to do the right thing, or they do want to do the right thing. It's not sometimes, they do want to do the right thing. And I don't know what happened. I know Raleigh's got a good chief, and I think the world of her. I don't know what happened, but you know, something happened somewhere, and I don't know what it was, and I'm not going to blame anybody, but I would have done it differently. I'll be honest with you, and I'm not going to sit here and lie to you.
And me as a watch commander, you know, you've got a platoon of officers who your job is to support and protect and quit. But if I get an order from the sheriff to stand down, I'm going to obey that order unless he's not on scene and he doesn't understand the situation, and I see an opportunity to save a life. I'm going to disobey that order for that specific incident. But generally, we all obey orders, and it's no different than in the military. If you don't obey orders, things go wrong. Lives are put in danger. I don't agree with what happened, but I would have been standing with the Raleigh police officers, and I would have been obeying orders. And it's just the way it is. Don't have the authority that the sheriff has. But as just a watch commander on scene, you're going to have to obey orders.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Having been a commander in Bosnia, and we were trying to separate the warring factions. The two-star division commander actually had he had authority to use the deadly force rules of engagement, but he couldn't be out there flying around in Apaches with me. So he deferred that authority to me. So I had to go out on every mission just to make that kind of a decision, because he needed someone with authority and seniority to make that tough decisions if you needed to pull a trigger. So those are tough calls. They're never easy. But like you said, Steve, they can't tell you something when they're 20 miles away, because they don't know what's really happening. And the decision's got to be made on the spot, and sometimes in milliseconds, not hours, not minutes. It's sometimes milliseconds to decide what you've got to do. And you got to pray that the people are trained properly and have the experience to make that kind of a call. So thank you. This is kind of a combined one, which is really a good one. And I'm sure we'll get some good comments on this. It has to do with the violence. If the business owners, this is from Henry and Tammy C. I was going to combine both of them. If business owners could not get a 911 response during the riots, how are we as citizens supposed to rely on law enforcement to respond to a 911 call when we need to help from our homes and our neighborhoods? And this translates to, we have our Second Amendment right to bear arms, like the situation in St. Louis. You can use that as an example, but what are we as U.S. citizens supposed to do when we call 911 and there's no one there to help you?
Well, we have in North Carolina what's called Castle Doctrine, and it applies both in your home and your business. And if you are threatened with deadly force, you can use deadly force to defend both your home and your business.
Yeah, and I agree. That's what my concern is about defunding police. You're going to see people that they look like they feel like they got to take care of themselves. And I've had groups to speak with me in the last month about some of this same thing. What can I do? What can be done if the police is not here, and da 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 da. And I tell them same thing that Steve just said. And also your car, you're fearful for your life. You got to do something about it. But I try to tell them, give the police the opportunity to do something. But you as a group in your neighborhood, be like a group of people that citizens to pulling together. A community watch is what I'm trying to say. And that way you know what's going on. You got computers now. And, you say, hey, there's something over here that don't look right. Then yes, let the neighbors come. Yes, we don't want somebody to get hurt because we can't be there. And they've got to protect their own. And if you've got a good neighbor, he's going to help you. If you've got a good community watch program, they're going to call and say, this is happening. And so many ways now that you can communicate with people. This should never happen, but it's going to. And you got to stay alive. You just got to stay awake, and you got to talk to each other and say, when you meet in your community, say, if this happens, can I call you? Can I do this? Can I do that? But I'm hoping that we'll have enough police officers that will be there to take care of things, because that's what we're trained to do.
I agree. The reason why the one person brought up the St. Louis incident is because, again, politics appears to be creeping in with the district attorney, because they didn't go after any of the potential rioters or people that trespass. They've gone after the people that were using the Castle Doctrine and brought out their own weapons. They've since confiscated the weapons, and now there's talk that the DA there in St. Louis may indict the couple, or at least the individual with the AR-15. So everything's, what's supposed to be up is up, what's down is down, is up. It's such a mess, and it's going to take DOJ or the state AG, who happens to be a conservative, to jump in, because they don't understand what she's trying to do is to go after this individual or this couple with regard to Castle Doctrine. So what happens in the next couple of days is going to be interesting. And that's why people, just like Steve may cite Castle Doctrine, how favorable is that going to be looked upon, even though you're going to stand your ground with your domain or your vehicle? So there's problems coming, and a lot of people need some answers, because you're right, Donnie, they may go too far, because their concern is 911, there isn't going to be a law enforcement officer there. So I appreciate that. Steve, I got one for you, and this is kind of a combined one. Because of the efforts, because a lot of the cities have failed to defend and protect the people, and you haven't been a military person, I'll add some things to this, but what should be the federal government's role when the cities, the mayors, the governors fail to take action to defend and protect the people? And if the governor doesn't do something like activate the National Guard because he doesn't feel he has enough law enforcement, what should be the role of the federal government when it comes down to a state failing to protect its citizens?
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about martial law. And that's clearly a last resort. Once the federal government comes into your community and takes over your the functions, the responsibilities of the local government, then things have gotten way out of hand. I hope we never get to that. The federal government does have a role in this topic. The federal government does have some responsibility in what's going on. We need some resources. We've talked about a national database for some of these officers that we can't get rid of, that keep mistreating the citizenry or the arrestees. And Sheriff Harrison knows these. When you have a new officer comes into your agency and he starts, he's having to take arrestees to the hospital. Every time he makes an arrest, somebody needs medical attention. Well, you know there's a problem there, and we investigate that and we follow up that, and investigators are looking more deeply into his background and his history and so on. But as far as federal law enforcement, you know, they, and even the state law enforcement, the FBI, they only have original jurisdiction in a very narrow group of crimes. Even the Highway Patrol is a very narrow jurisdiction, unless it's a mutual aid response. Their arrest authority comes from Chapter 20 of the motor vehicle laws. The FBI does not have original jurisdiction in, say, break-ins or robberies or murders, unless the local jurisdiction calls them in. It's the same for the federal government, unless there's a interstate flight or it's a violation of a federal law. They don't have original jurisdiction. They can't come into Wake County and take a murder case investigation away from the local sheriff. So it's a mixed bag, I guess is my answer.
Yeah. Having worked at the federal level and us both being military, you know, we're kind of restricted because of the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 about use of active duty soldiers on U.S. soil. Sad part about it is we can go defend the North-South Korea border. We can go help in Syria, but we can't defend our own southern border with active duty forces. We can put them in the back and they can help handle admin, they can handle supply runs, but they can't be on the border. But that does free up CBP to potentially help us on the southern border and things of that nature. But the question came from more of when President Trump was talking about the insurrection law, but actually goes back to 1807, but it was actually amended, or addition was added in 2006, where if public order is not being controlled at the state or local level, then you can use the military to come in. And it's happened 5 times where they've declared martial law. President Eisenhower did it in Arkansas when it was trying to segregate the schools, or desegregate the schools, excuse me. President LBJ did it twice. RFK, when he was the U.S. AG, Attorney General, he actually did it himself also back in '62. And then in '92, President Bush, H.W. Bush, did it with the LA riot. So it's been done. There is precedent for it, but it should be a last resort when public order can't be used. But the big thing is there's a lot of people worried that if the state's not going to be there, and we want to defund the police, our only last recourse will be that the Guard become activated or federalized, so we can bring them in to make a difference. So those are the concerns of the people that are listening to this call, and we need to get the message out that there are recourses before, like Donnie said, where you got to use your Second Amendment rights and defend your castle under the castle doctrine. There are things we can do. We have to educate. I mean, you need to educate your daughters, anyone that's driving gets in these situations. Because to think about it, you're driving down Capitol Boulevard in the evening and all of a sudden the road's blocked and you don't know what to do. Those incidents are coming and there are going to be more of them. And thank goodness that the police are there trying to calm fears and things of that nature. but we need that. We need to know they're going to be there. So what I'm going to do is one last question here, because we are running out of time, and then I'd like to see if you guys want to do any closing before I finish. As citizens of North Carolina, what can we do to keep and protect our law enforcement in place with no changes, rather than what's being done up north, like in New York City with regard to the defunding in LA, Minneapolis, and other cities are looking to defund, even Atlanta. What can we do to voice our opinion, whether it's to the General Assembly or to the local city council of Raleigh and things of that nature? Who should they be using besides you, Donnie, you, Steve, and myself, Alan Swain? So several of us running for office this year, but others, Donnie, hopefully in the future, and any other candidates. We need a voice out there, and who should the people be turning to our elected officials now? What would you recommend, Donnie?
Well, yes, like I said earlier, you got to speak up. If you live inside the city of Raleigh, Wendell, Evelyn, wherever it may be, go to your town council meetings and let them know how you feel. Other people go when things is going south for them, whether you like it or not, but let the people know that you want law enforcement in your neighborhood. You want to keep the local police active and strong. Go to the legislature, and let them know they are elected. And like I said earlier, unfortunately, you have to look who you vote for, look at what they stand for. And if they're not doing the job, let them know it. You got to speak up. And I think that's where we missed the boat. The silent majority sits back and let a small group tell us what to do. And that's not right. We got to look at it from the big picture. And that's the way law enforcement does. We don't take sides. We just come when we're called to make sure we try to keep the peace. But the citizens, and I keep saying silent majority because there's a lot of people out there that I talk to, they feel the same way I do, but they've got to let the people that's in leadership positions know this is what we want, instead of a small group telling what we want.
Great. Steve?
No, I agree completely. And the media's played a role in this as well. And I don't want to be one of those that bashes the media like so many others do. But where is the injury report from the officers that were injured in those riots? There were a number of officers that were transported to the hospital as a result of those projectiles that looters were and rioters were throwing. I mean, that's a news story. Those police officers that were injured are members of our community. They're the officers that put on body armor to go to work, and were wearing protective equipment and so on, and we're still injured. But yeah, there's no interest in the news media in covering any of that. So along with the sheriff, I add my voice to his. Go to your city council meetings. The sheriff is independent of the county commissioners, but they have an interest in what you have to say as to how law enforcement is performed in Wake County.
Yeah, I agree. You got to make your voice heard. Let's go back to a former president of a different party who said elections have consequences, and you have to remember that. A lot of these major cities have continued to vote for the same party over and over and over, and that's the definition of insanity. You vote the same way, you expect a different result. You have to live with the consequences of who you elect to office, whether that's for city council, whether that's county commission, whether that's for mayor, whether that's for governor, whether that's for president of the United States. You get the elected officials you vote into office, and you need to make your voice heard. It's time for the silent majority to stand out. It's time for decisive leadership. Do you have any parting comments you'd like to say, Donnie, before we shut this down?
Yes, I do. It bothers me to hear a lot of rhetoric about police officers. I don't know a police officer or a law enforcement officer that I've ever met wouldn't give their life to save somebody else's. And I'm sincere when I say that. In talking to your leaders, yes, I was elected sheriff, but it didn't matter to me, and it didn't matter to my men. And I don't know of any law enforcement officers. We don't ask if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever you may be. That's not in our sight. We took an oath to do our job. And when we stop people in the middle of the night, during the day, whenever it may be, yes, sometimes it gets out of hand. Usually the arrestee is the one that dictates what happens. Now, yes, there are some bad police officers, as I said earlier. but usually that arrestee, it dictates what happened. If he wants to be arrogant and don't want to comply, then there's a problem. But we've got to work with our leaders in all over the city, all over the county. We've got to come together and say, look, we've got some problems. How can we solve them? And that's what I try to do, and that's what everybody should try to do. It's, you know, we're law enforcement people. We're not true politicians, and I don't like to be labeled a politician, but I suggest and tell everybody, if you get stopped by a police officer, comply and complain later to their supervisor. Because that's what's happened most of the time. Some of these things that's happened throughout the United States, here in Wake County, right on down the line. If the person had just complied with the officer, even if he was wrong, and then go to a lawyer or go to the city council or go to whoever you want to go to and say, this is what happened. That's the best way to do it. And don't let tempers wind up getting us in trouble, both sides. And so, but I was privileged to be here, and I'm always open for comments, and people don't agree with me, I'll talk to them. And if they want to talk to me about what they would like to do next time, maybe I can share those too. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Steve?
Just to add to what the sheriff said, we have a robust internal affairs system in Raleigh and Wake County. As I said, Sheriff Harrison assigned a number of internal affairs investigations to me. And what you saw with Floyd, Mr. Floyd, is not tolerated, nothing even close to that. When officers are hired, they go through a battery of psychological tests. We're looking to weed out those people that are attracted to law enforcement for the wrong reason. I was telling a story the other day that one of the first arsons I investigated was set by a volunteer fireman. And so, with the point of that being that some people are attracted to emergency services for the excitement or for the authority or for the power. And that's the wrong reasons to be interested in this profession. And we work really hard to weed those out. Even if they make it through the testing and make it through the academy, they're on probation for a year. And we watch them closely for any signs that they are not even tempered, are not reasonable in their interactions with others. So we do police ourselves, and we will be a part, law enforcement will be a part of the solution to what's going on. The national database of officers, so that officers can't move from one department to another with bad disciplinary record. So there are going to be changes, and we're going to be part of the solution.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. I really want to appreciate everyone for attending. Special thanks to Sheriff Donnie Harrison, Lieutenant Steve Hale, soon to be a Wake County Commissioner for us. I'm Alan Swain again, running for Congressional District 2, here to be the voice for you all in attendance here up in Washington, D.C. It's time for decisive leadership. If you don't believe in public safety, we all need to come together and voice our opinions to make sure that our current leaders know where we sit. We don't want incidents that are occurring all over the U.S., like in Seattle, L.A., New York City, Atlanta. We don't want that to happen in Raleigh, but we're not that far away if we don't step up right now and make our voices heard. Back in the Blue is our initiative. We're trying to make a difference. We had a big session downtown rally in Raleigh, down by the General Assembly. We're looking to do one in Apex on the 25th. We'll get information out to you. We'll have speakers. Feed the Blue is another part of this. But these are great initiatives to come out and show your support for the men in blue. That thin blue line is the only thing between us and chaos. We don't want mob rule. We want the rule of law, and that's the most important thing. If you didn't think this is one of those definitive elections coming up, because there are some elected officials that are not voicing their opinion in support for the men in blue, and if we don't speak up for the men in blue, we will have chaos, and we will have more like we had in June in downtown Raleigh if we're not careful. We have to nip this in the bud now. It's going to take decisive leadership, and we three here are willing to be part of that leadership to make a difference. So thank you all, and we look forward to our next conversation on public safety as we move through the summer. Thanks to everyone for attending. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.